Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where we have a brand new ebook waiting for you, absolutely free at businessofstory.com. It's called The 5 Stages of Grief in Telling Your Business Story, How to Overcome Story Fright to Grow Your Leadership, People, and Organization. In it, we help you deal with things like denial, that story actually works, or anger, I don't know how to tell a story, bargaining, I'll do anything but tell a story, depression, I have no good stories to tell. And finally, we're going to land you on acceptance of the power of story in your life. You'll become a master storyteller when you go to businessofstory.com and download your free ebook right now. And then start living into your most potent stories.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Have you ever found yourself in such a position that you just had to talk your way out of it? But in doing so, you got yourself into an even more precarious sink or swim situation? Well, today's guest did exactly that in college. And he ended up amassing a tidy fortune in the process by his early 20s, only to lose it all. Moved back in with mom and dad, and then promised himself he'd never let that happen again. Scott Gerber is CEO of Community Co., an organization that builds and manages membership communities for elite professionals. He is also founder of YEC, an invitation-only organization comprised of the world's most successful young entrepreneurs, and Forbes Council, a collective of invitation-only organizations for elite executives. As you can see, we got a bit of a theme going here all around networking. Well, Scott is an internationally syndicated columnist and author of the book Never Get a Real Job. He's been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Bloomberg, and I could go on and on and on. I'll end with Fox News, Inc., and Entrepreneur, and has been honored by NASDAQ and the White House. That's quite an accomplishment for a young professional. Today's going to be a real treat because we get to speak with Scott about his networking work as captured in his new book, Super Connector. Stop networking and start building business relationships that matter. Listen and learn what kind of networker you might be, a thinker, an enabler, or an executor. Plus, we're going to explore the 3 key traits Scott says makes up every super connector. Will you agree? Well, let's see as I connect you right now with Scott Gerber. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I've been having so much fun on your website and all the massive amounts of media coverage you have gotten in a fairly young career around your entrepreneurial expertise and the 2 books you've written, now a Super Connector out. Before we get to all of that, I want you to take us back in time to a moment when you were a small lad, whenever that was, that informed or shaped who you are today.
We're going to go real deep really early, aren't we here?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's funny. The one thing I am most grateful for is that I actually have that moment in my life. So it was junior year when I was in New York University. And I was sort of known as the wonderkin producer. I was in film school at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Probably one of the only students that went in and realized in the first year that I was not going to be the next great American auteur, that I was not a director, I wasn't artistic, but I did have a skill set for being a producer. And we were in short supply, if that can give you some sense of the arts school. And I just realized that I fundamentally had some early understandings of how the industry worked, and a lot of chutzpah. And so I thought, well, Why go to class? Why learn anymore? I must know it all. I'm going to go out and just start working. And I just thought, oh, well, you just do that. So I started basically telling people in the industry that I had met through school and everything else that I was a 30-year-old producer with lots of experience. This I do not recommend, by the way, people do this. Basically lie their ass off. And basically I could produce your program. And for a while I was successful. I worked with some very large production companies in the music and entertainment space. I was producing music videos by the time I was 20 years old that you would have seen on major television networks. I was
like with who?
I can't say who the artists are, but I can say with like Atlantic Records, with Blue Man Group. I actually worked with them for a little bit. Actually, I could say them. But we were doing commercial work. But then I started making the mistakes that I just didn't quite get. The youth was getting the best of me. The inexperience was getting the best of me. I started spending a lot of money on taking people out for meals, and not like $50, but like $500. I started. So
you're trying to live the whole New York producer lifestyle.
I was cashing the checks before I was making them, if that's the way to put it. And I was starting to get really stuck in the life, which was making me make really dumb business decisions. I like to say that my first big aha awakening was the moment that I fundamentally realized what it was like to rent New York office space. Because here I thought this is like before the WeWork years, right? WeWork, you rent the space, you can have it for like an hour at a time, whatever. This was like Madison Avenue real estate at $50 a square foot. And here's a 20-year-old that somehow conned his way into getting that kind of space. So anyway, the point is, by the time I was a junior, end of year, I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I thought that was it. I'm going to make it. This is great. So I started hiring more. I started going out there and spending. And by senior year, and this was the aha moment, I had $700 left to my name.
So you were a producer. You talked your way into these gigs. You were able to apparently deliver if you had clients that kept coming back, made several hundreds of thousands of dollars, only to blow it in a few short years.
Literally not even two. In 18 months, I went from thinking I was going to be like the big hit, young producer type to that. And what it taught me was, so many things. First of all, humility and all the things that go with learning to have your ego shattered, which thankfully that happened to me at a much younger age. I know far too many people that still have it today. Getting rid of that ego was one of the best things ever. Leading with ego killed me. Leading with my, the false idol of success before you had it, of consistency before you had it was a killer. But the aha moment for me after hitting that rock bottom is I took stock in my life. And I never forget my mother at the time. She was a real job loyalist, a 30-year veteran of the New York City Board of Education, was a special education teacher. And, to her, the graduation of NYU, that meant it's time Scott gets the reality check, hits the real world. And she says, well, now it's time for you to get a job. We were 2 weeks before graduation. I'm basically impoverished. I have blown all of my social capital because I can't do anything anymore because of what happened in the industry.
So let me ask you right there. I got to clarify this. So you did not actually drop out of school?
No,
you were
I was
being a producer while still going to NYU.
That's correct. I never dropped out. And it was in that moment that I sort of thought to myself, man, the hard knocks lessons that I have learned of the ass kicking I just got over the last year and a half, how could I go and listen to my mother who's like, now it's time to go get a job? How could I take all that learning, all that education, all that real hard knock stuff, and then go and work for the man, so to speak, and not learn from those mistakes and build myself back up? And so in that moment, I made both a promise to myself about where I wanted to go, and I made a promise to myself about how I would basically handle myself. And the latter was, I am not going to make the same mistake twice. I am not going to let ego and vanity and these nonsense things that made me make the dumb decisions that I made, nearly bankrupting myself before I was 21, be the key indicator for how I was going to lead my life, personally or professionally. That was the first thing. And then I made a promise about my future. I said, the thing that would have helped me to overcome all of this, that would have really gotten rid of the pain before it really hit me, although I still argue that was the best pain I ever felt in my life, is that I said, if I ever find success in my life, if I ever feel success, I want to go and I want to tell people my story and surround myself with other people who have seen what I've seen, to learn from one another, to create a value for one another, but most importantly, to tell the real story as we grow up together. As we've seen success, tell the actual story, not the, hey, I'm Steve Jobs, I created Apple, look at this $1 trillion company story. That's the ending. But the how. Make sure you share the how. And that was sort of the foundational beginnings of how both I became successful in my next company, but more importantly, what led me to where I am today, which is building communities of very successful people that have a main ambition and drive to not only connect with one another, but to give back in a way of teaching what it took for them to get there and ensuring the next generations can be just as successful.
Okay, so before we get there, now you've just graduated from NYU, a very prestigious school. You've been through the film world. You spent 1.5 years, 2 years doing a pretty good job of digging yourself up some pretty good business as a producer. You're now flat broke. You got $700 in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You're at home with mom and dad. What'd that feel like?
The worst experience possible, because, there's nothing worse than having the high and then having the worst possible low. And it's not that I don't love my parents, obviously, and this is going back, many, many years ago now. But I just remember there's nothing worse, at least in my opinion, than going back and feeling like you're at square one again before you took the steps to try to better yourself. And so what's the last memory you have before college, right? It's like, oh, I'm dearly departing, leaving the nest, going to do my thing, learning to be my own man, all that nonsense, hyperbole type stuff. And then finding yourself in the same place when you left.
So what was the first job you had to get when mom said, go get a job, Scott?
I've never done it. I have never worked for anyone else. I took the last $700 I had left to my name. I got back up and I hustled myself to figure out how to solve all the problems that got me there and create a program and a product that I could go out and sell with my own two hands, with my own skills, which at the time, now it's a very ubiquitous term, but I was one of the first ones to ever productize the sizzle reel. In fact, up till a couple years ago, I owned every domain with the word sizzle reel in it. Like, that's what we did. We produced sizzle reels for PR, marketing, and entertainment professionals, where I would go out to big brands like agencies or Ogilvy, or individual brands. And I'd say, look, you guys had these great massive campaigns this year. You have to share that in bite-sized, story-sized pieces with your executive team or your sales teams. Give me those assets, and I'm going to make sure that you have a great story with all the panache and metrics and everything that's meaningful to that core constituency in 2 to 3 minutes max. And you're going to be able to show that at your conferences or your sales meetings or whatever. And I remember I did the first one for free by begging, borrowing, and stealing every relationship I had to get me in the door with one company. And then that was it. From there, I basically built it into another multi-million-dollar company. And it was just a slog. I edited every one of those things myself the first year in business. I sold every one of them myself in the first year of business. I made sure that the pitch was incredibly short, sweet, and to the point, that I wasn't spending $1 more than I had to. I was living on a couch, in a friend's apartment to finally get out of my parents' house just to get the hell out for a mindset shift. I mean, anything you could do to learn from spending too much or wasting time or productivity loss that I was having or not charging correctly for my services, all the crap that I went through in that miserable period of time. I audited myself, checked the boxes on what I wanted to do as next steps, put it into that new, very straightforward, very simple product offering, and just sold, edited until finally I was able to build a business again.
And what year was this?
That would have been 2005 or 6, one of those 2 years. Yeah, so it's been a stretch. Yep.
Were most of these sizzle reels then being seen online, or where would your clients be playing these?
Most of the times they were for very important meetings of the C-suite, or sales and executive meetings, or pitch meetings for agencies to go re-win business from their clients.
But these agencies could do this stuff themselves. Why did they hand it off to you?
Not back then. Like, it's today, it sounds so obvious. It sounds so easy, right? Who does?
I guess you're right, because back then I had edit bays, and they were very expensive, and I had several hundred thousands of dollars worth of Avids that we worked with. But you're right. In this day and age, you could do it all. You could do it all
on your laptop, on your phone, even. But back then, it was these massively tooled, systemized businesses for a certain kind of thing. And the idea of a media department in a PR firm just didn't exist. And so because of the combination of branding it effectively, again, literally the one thing that I learned the first time I made the mistake was branding the company correctly. And so instead of having some stupid ego-driven name, of which, wait for it, the name of the company that failed in college was Gerber Entertainment. What the hell does that mean other than, oh, look at me, I'm a solopreneur with my last name trying to be a big shot, to then call it, sizzle it, the Sizzle Reel Company. You can't literally be any more clear with what that did. And I bought every URL I could get my hands on. So when people would come to me over time, it was just like, go to sizzlereel.com, go to sizzlereels.com. It was about rebranding and making it so simple, stupid that it was very easy to tell the story. And then once you had enough logos and work, you just became the go-to resource. And that was the differentiator.
And I would imagine your experience then as a producer and some of the contacts you made there just made this kind of a natural offshoot for you to do these. But did you feel like a little bit like total blue collar worker guy? I mean, you're digging up the business, which is cool, the entrepreneurial side. But now I know how hard it is to edit. It takes freaking forever to do it well. So you must have been editing into the wee hours and then selling in the wee morning.
Oh, absolutely. There were many, many overnights and many pots of coffee. But I'll say this, I think more businesses today would survive and thrive if the owner actually started by doing all the positions, if the C-suite actually understood what makes the sausage. I think far too many businesses stray, from my experience, from the actual product itself. And that's where problems and lack of vision all of a sudden comes into effect, or overpromising, underdelivering, all the things that go wrong in a business. I can basically take back to how much does your C-suite fundamentally understand process and product. And so I think back then, number one, there was just this sort of, way of looking at it that I just didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to do that whole, this is going back to when I'm in my early 20s at that time. Now I've got, 4 kids living in Battery Park and with a wife and a dog in New York City. Very different life that I live now than then. But back then, every dollar was like fighting for my passion of never going backwards again. And so that just pure adrenaline matched with ego brews, matched with, I'm going to figure this out, hell or high water, I think was the difference maker. But you needed that swift kick in the ass to be able to actually get out there and do it. Because it's one thing to say, go be passionate. I love when people say that. Go be passionate. You got to do things you're passionate about. Yeah, passion takes you so far until you don't have a business model, So that was the thing. But I think what was really most exciting to me was once I was back on my feet, once I realized I learned from a lot of mistakes, and again, we all still make mistakes today. I think that the second promise that I made to myself coming true was the real difference maker, and now where my life has gone. But it all started because of what happened in that initial failure.
And what was the second promise?
That I swore that I would surround myself with amazing people who equally had made a mistake or learned through hard knocks how to become successful, to ensure they gave back to the next generations. And so, back in 2009, it was right before the Great Recession and Depression, hit the United States for this generation. You had youth unemployment at that time at around 50% for postgraduates, early 20-somethings. You had, the doom and gloom, Gen Ys are a lost generation, every mantra and headline clickbait thing you could come up with against how we were screwed. I basically had made good on my promise. I surrounded myself with these great young entrepreneurs, and we all said, look, we've obviously done something here. What if we could build a platform, because we want to, not to monetize or anything at the time, but, just to give our time, to go to universities, to, speak to college students, to go to, wherever we could, to just tell our story of what it actually takes to create a job, to keep a job, for the new reality of being an entrepreneur as an occupation.
Okay, Scott, so you are a very passionate guy. I can hear the energy coming through. And you made that point earlier that I think is worth taking a breath here and underscoring, that passion isn't enough, that you have to have a purpose. And it comes down to that defined purpose. In your case, sizzlereel.com. The Sizzle Company, you had a purpose of going out and delivering these really great sizzle reels to keep you from having to go back home to mom and dad. And then your passion kicks in to make that purpose a reality. So what was your purpose then that was driving your passions to do this for these newly graduated and newly unemployable at this point Gen Yers and Gen Xers out there?
Because I understood them. because the only difference is that they had a crappy economy they couldn't handle, and I found myself in bad circumstances for other reasons, but the outcome was the same. We were both facing the end of a gun. And, whereas mine was self-inflicted in many cases, although, like I said, I think that was the best self-inflicted wound I could have given myself, especially at such a young age. The reality is that wasn't the case with these other young folks. And so I just felt a sense of duty. I mean, there's no other way to do it. My life as a connector, as someone that is habitually generous, that really does care about other people, especially because I've seen what happens when you're not that. Right. I first experienced what it was like to be a out for oneself, transactional type person. That's what led me to my initial downfall that sort of kicked this whole thing off. And so if I could just simply put, bestow that education in a less painful way to others, I maybe would stop them from feeling that kind of pain. And some could say, look, the pain was good, and maybe you should feel that pain. But feel the pain because you want to go in and feel the pain, right? Don't feel the pain because, you got screwed because a bunch of people decided, to sell houses to people that they couldn't afford, and some people bought them when they shouldn't have. And that tanked an economy, so you have no job prospects, right? Very different situation.
So that led to your first book, that Never Get a Real Job, How to Dump Your Boss, Build a Business, and Not Go Broke. Now, before we talk about this, have you ever had a boss?
Never.
So growing up in high school, did you have a job?
I worked as a freelance editor. That's how I basically knew I had a passion for the concept of editing. But I always was
a freelance video editor versus a writing editor?
Correct.
Okay.
Video editor.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go out and I'd have to hustle for work. And whether it was, a school video yearbook or a bar mitzvah, I never had a boss. I had several different people that either hired me or companies that hired me, but I had to go and hustle for that work. All 1099 freelancer world. So I've had deadlines for people. I've had clients, obviously, throughout my whole life in various forms. But no, I have never actually been on someone else's payroll in that regard.
So essentially, never get a real job, how to dump your boss, the boss I never had. Let me show you how to basically make it in the world, in your way, in your terms, living into your own story is what you're about.
Correct. It's certainly not about, hey, go live down the street as a vagabond eating government cheese. It's about the idea of really going back, ironically, to the story I just told you. I mean, what my mother said to me the 2 weeks before graduation was, it's time to get a real job. And that always resonated, right? Because a lot of, especially millennials, we've always had this idea of the real job. And even with the quotes in the book, I always got a kick out of the cover with the air quotes around the word real, because that's the condescending way to what is a job. It's a real job, right? And so it's sort of an homage to my mother's words to me in a certain way. But just the idea that if you're going to work your ass off, you might as well do it for yourself. And especially in an environment for early grads, that book was for early 20 and 30 somethings that were looking to make a move and make a change and be their own boss in a smart, grounded way. The reality was, from an economics perspective, if you're making $25,000 or $30,000 starting salary a year working for somebody else, where you don't control your employment status, you don't control, the business, you really have no authority in any way to make decisions that make or break your employment long term. Why not just say to yourself, could I go out, work double, but make the same to at least have a foundation that would enable me to do the next thing and build slowly? And that was sort of the premise. How do you reverse engineer the money you need to make in order to get rid of that either job, the albatross you took because you needed something, but it wasn't what you cared about, or because you couldn't find an opportunity on your own because of the times we were in?
Mm-hmm. Now, when I was prepping for this show, Scott, I went to your site at scottgerber.com, by the way, folks, for those of you scoring at home, if you want to pull it up while you're listening. You, for a young entrepreneur, have an immense amount of media. I mean, you've been on CNN and CNBC and NASDAQ and Fox News Channel. How have you done that, or how or why, maybe I should ask, has your story so resonated with the world, and especially the news media, that you have been able to garner so much attention? And a lot of this is around your first book, and then we'll jump into your second book. But how have you done that?
When you have a message worth sharing, it tends to share itself. And there's a lot of people who have publicists and who have messaging experts and are silver spoon, know the world behind the scenes, all those kinds of things. In my case, we never had any of those. It's all organic. We've never, initially me and then the company, we've never, invested previously into that kind of thing because, my thesis was simple. If I'm doing something meaningful and people hear about it, they're going to be able to organically and naturally say, this is a story worth telling. And so when it came to, putting the message out there, again, let's take it back. Every single day, if you go back and look at headlines in 2009 and 10, when the story sort of kicked off, everything was doom and gloom. There was no, oh man, what a great, good feel this is. And so I think what we really were able to hit on and the nerve we touched was that we were part of the trend. As far as the story, we were part of that narrative, but we were a little bit of sunshine. We were showing there was some good that could come out of this, that maybe there is a new way of thinking, that there are demonstrable successes that don't have to be millionaires or billionaires, but that are actually going out and starting the next lawn care business, next junk removal company, things that people could just latch onto because it's partly the American dream, and partly the hustle. But partly it was just a solution to a really crappy problem that my generation at the time was facing and many other generations. And so I think the media, really resonated. I mean, when the New York Times had reached out, there's sort of a funny story with this. When the New York Times had reached out, it was sort of like, hey, we hear you're leading a movement to solve youth unemployment through entrepreneurship. And I was like, who is this again? They're like, it's the Sunday business section of the New York Times. Absolutely. Like, what are you going to say to that? Oh, yeah, sure. I'd love to talk to you about what we're doing. But the reality is that people were talking. This became a word of mouth thing. We started basically not just doing the events. The reason the media initially had heard, because I had reached out to business development people at various publications to see if they would syndicate content from these young entrepreneurs, answering questions of students and recent college grads about how to start a business and run those columns. And they were. And I think the reporters then saw that content and was like, what's this? And then that's how they started reaching out. But it was very organic. And I think that's why it transcended into what was arguably probably several thousand articles over the several years we talked about that movement, because it was a natural story. It was also cinematic in a way. The beginning, look at this horrible situation we're in. The middle, we have an idea. Then it's the Oedipus of the idea. What does this look like as it's, moved from idea to action items to color in the form of events and kids talking to kids? And then it's the outcomes. Well, have people taken this advice? And what are those steps when they took the advice and what were their outcomes? And now what are their good feel stories? And then it's the results. How did this really impact the entire thing? And now we're on to the next part. How do we systemize this? How do we put policy in place for this? And it just was a natural narrative that allowed for consistent, ongoing public relations, if you will, built in, because it was a story and it was a message worth sharing.
And it was timely, urgent, and extraordinarily relevant to their viewers. Now, did this lead to your founding of the Young Entrepreneur Council?
Yeah, that's sort of what happened. That became the group I was sort of referring to earlier, that it was organic. I was just bringing people together, and then we said, what should we call it? Let's call it the Young Entrepreneur Council, and then that became, the sort of body that started as a group of 30. Today, it's, nearly 2,000 successful multi-million or multi-billion-dollar company founders, all into the age of 40. But by banding together, they brought new people, and those new people brought new people. And they were all sort of vetted and successful because that was what the group ethos had become. It was sort of a self-vetted population of people that, really cared about this mission. So they were able to amplify that mission because they became, I hate to use the vernacular in market speak, but like brand ambassadors of the idea. Right. So it took on a life of its own into local markets and regional and different subject matter expertise areas, things that I never dreamed of. It naturally took on, all because at its heart, we all shared that passion. And then the obvious logical thing happens, because when you put really smart people together, what do they want to do? They also want to connect. They also want to make themselves better and their own businesses better and learn from each other. And that was sort of my second aha moment in my life, where it was like, we can do well and do good. Do good, obviously, by giving back, but do well by connecting groups of people that have reached a level of success to help them be more successful. And that became sort of aha moment number 2, where we then over the several years since, have built many communities for various different kinds of executives, professionals, and entrepreneurs with that same sort of heart and ethos at the center to better connect professionals so they can better connect to one another.
Wow. So you parlayed this 18 months of learning and disaster, and then graduating from NYU to your mom and dad's home, now into this business of helping millennials understand, and Gen Yers, how to get businesses or how to start making businesses in the worst economic conditions of the world, of our time, that gets you through it. You connect and build this organization. And that apparently, I'm assuming, led to your most current book, Super Connector. Stop networking and start building business relationships that matter. So when I read that, and being a 56 something, actually 57 by the time people hear this. So I'm thinking I grew up in, of course, the networking buzz world, but it sounds like so much has changed, certainly with the recession and job loyalty and jobs and employees, and the ability to be able to work from home or to work from anywhere with technology this day and age, that networking you really have to throw out the window and start thinking about the new modern relationship, which is found quite often online, but then developed mano a mano, person to person, and actually starting to work with each other and building that loyalty through trust.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I've always seen the networker, and we've all met a true networker, right? The person that's sort of shaking your hands with his right hand, handing you a business card with the left, talking about himself using his voice, and looking straight past you of who's next in line that he wants to meet. And that icky transactional out for oneself mentality was really everything that I hated in the idea of quote unquote networking. It's just that it's an icky old school feel that started, I'm sure, many generations ago as a cornerstone of business relationships and personal relationship creation. But like everything from marketing platforms to social media to networking, it was bastardized by the 5th or 6th or 10th generation of, the ninjas, gurus, and wonderkins talking about what the best tactic or trick was, instead of, hey, wasn't this about humans meeting humans and forming bonds, not conversion metrics and growth hacking? So, really the fundamentals of my career and that of my partner, and starting with YEC, Young Entrepreneur Council, and then building many other groups like Forbes Councils, which has several thousand C-suite executives that have similar, tones to what we originally built, or what we do for global brands today, and building communities and contributor networks for, global brands, all sort of have this similar concept of you can build foundational, meaningful, valuable relationships if only you took a quick step back and realized what the original intent was meant to be and sort of got back into that mindset. Not, I need someone to create value for myself, but rather, I can create value for many people, and over time that will come back tenfold to me because I'm not looking for one-on-one transactional value. I'm looking for a lifetime of value creation. It's a totally different mindset. And so with the book and the way we run our businesses, we really talk about the idea of a connector or a super connector. And I often joke, I say a super connector is not something you could put in your LinkedIn bio. In fact, if you say you are a super connector, I will guarantee you're a networker. You're not a super connector. A super connector is known by others as a super connector, the person, the man or woman you need to know. But it's the idea that it's this mindset of value creation to others, of community building, of curiosity about people, of consistently being habitually generous, and building people up to help ultimately them create value in their own lives, personally and professionally. That's what it's about. Mindset over and framework over tips, tactics, and networking.
Who's the best super connector that you know, or one of them? I would imagine you know several.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are so many amazing people. In fact, many of the people, ironically, that are amazing connectors don't even want to be known. They're not public people, which is ironic. Many of the best connectors, by the way, also are introverts, which is ironic because people think, oh, this is an extrovert thing. It's very network mentality that extroverts are better than introverts. Not true.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you give us an example of where you've seen super connecting really work?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a friend named Jason Gagnard. He runs a company called Mastermind Talks based in Canada. And he is someone who has mastered many dimensions of connecting. So first starting with the online world. What I love about Jason is the time and thought he puts into connecting people, because he doesn't just send, as an example, visually to paint a picture for your audience. You know, what do most people do? They'll write an email. John meets Sally. Sally does this. John does that. Here, connect, right? Some version of that. But he doesn't do that. And by trade and by the way he has taught himself to really sit and think about the best way to connect people, what is that? It's to mimic the humanity. It's to allow technology to amplify his humanity and not the technology to take over his humanity. So anytime he wants to make an introduction, he records a 30 second to 2-minute video. You see his face, his intonations, the context of the environment he's in, how focused and careful he's making these introductions so they're meaningful, how much time he's taking to actually go through his rationale, not just of who the people are, but the why and what's important for both people to know. He sets up the relationship in such a valuable way by simply sending via communications like text or like an email, a video. It's the simplest hack in the world, but yet so much more human than just sending an email, right?
That's brilliant. I love it.
It changes your entire perspective on multiple things, right? First, how good does it feel to get that this is not meant for anybody but you and the person you're being introduced to? Like, there's something very intimate and special about that.
Yeah.
2, how much does it show that the person is listening? That the person who's making that introduction really listens to the world around them enough and cares enough to go and be that thoughtful. So that's his sort of framework there. And then for his events, he's created these intimate gatherings where everything is very specific. Who's attending and invited, the information he's gathering before those events to ensure he knows enough key cornerstone information and context about each person in attendance to strike and lead conversations to connect people. The seating arrangements at his events are not by random. They're incredibly specific to ensure collision. So there's a lot of thoughtfulness around every single part of his real world interactions as well. He removes as much friction as he can from anything that he's involved with for people to get to their most human and open selves, to remove the paint, to remove the lipstick on the pig and the LinkedIn profile panache, if you will, and just get back to what it was meant to be. Person A and person B connect because they should, and they have a meaningful connection.
He's done the research, so he knows their backstories and he knows what they are about and their purpose, so they connect purpose-minded people together.
Yep, absolutely. And what's most exciting, and this is a quick anecdote that I think people would really appreciate. So Jason, who I can't say enough of, and he's just one of, thankfully, many amazing connectors that not only profile in the book, but that are in the sort of world of caring about this framework and mindset around connection. But Jason was another person who had literally a life-altering event that changed his perspective. You know, similar to me, he found himself in nearly bankrupted, in debt up to his eyeballs. And he said, you know, I can lose all my money. I can lose my car and my stuff, but my social capital, I will never lose. And he found himself saying, I'm going to dive back in and figure out how to reinvest in my network to build his company rather than trying to figure out ways to get himself out of hock with doing work. And he built up, again, an events and mastermind style business, but coming from a position of realizing, let them take it all away. That's stuff. That's material. I want to focus on people because people in the end will always help people to get out of the tough spots and will always be the ones that I want to invest my time and money in. And that's what he did. And he's built a multi-million-dollar business as well as a result.
So the book, Super Connector, has 19 chapters. You cover a lot of ground in it. Is this all stuff that you saw happening as you were, graduating up through sizzle reels and into the YEC in your first book? Are these like the hard-won victories that you've seen in the real world connecting folks?
Yeah. So my partner and I, Ryan, the co-author and my partner in the community company, was one of the first community builders on the internet. In fact, he built right around the time Friendster was launched, a company called Brazen Careerists, which was one of the first major social networks. It's hard to believe that now, being over a decade ago. But he was called, I think Mashable one time called him like the godfather of online community or something. And so between his introverted online style community building and my extroverted real world pressing the flesh mentality, we have taken those perspectives, put them together over a decade's worth of learnings, plus bringing in some of the top connectors in almost every business and market sector, to bring together a series of frameworks. And I think it's important to hit on this really clearly for your audience. This is not a tips and tricks book. Anybody who tells you that there is a tips and tricks guide for networking is not thinking about the point of why you should be, quote unquote, networking in the first place. This is the same mentality of how you would look at losing weight if you were serious. It's not, oh, let me do Nutrisystem for 30 days and lose 10 pounds. And, that's how I'm going to do it. It's fundamentally changing how you eat, fundamentally changing how you live your lifestyle healthily and working out and fitness. The same thing applies here. These are a series of frameworks and mindsets that work for some of the best in the business, the people that literally are the best at what they do. But it is not meant for people to say, do these 5 things and you're going to be excellent at being a connector. It's meant to start to get you to think differently and deconstruct your past poor behaviors or things you've done wrong, to build relationships, correct those things, and figure out ways to pull from this book and other resources similarly to develop your own system for regaining your humanity and regaining the ability to build authentic, meaningful relationships.
And what do you mean by regaining your humanity? Is it because people just get into this robo networking mode?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that the vanity metrics and the Facebook style communications and the ease by which we can connect, I'm saying that, with air quotes right now, connect with people today has sort of made this false premise prevalent in the culture, which is one, because I can connect, I should, right? Which is a big issue. And the second is that people believe that being connected and being a connector, they've conflated those to be the same thing. Because of how easy it is to like, share, tweet, pin, DM, in-mail, whatever it is, they forgot the steps. It's the same thing we talked about earlier with everybody tells the story of Steve Jobs and Apple, but not when he was in the garage and the years that it took of building to what that company has become. Same thing goes here. Your top 10 people in the world that know you don't just know you because you handed them a business card, shook their hand, and had 5 conversations over 5 years. They know because they've been through the trenches with you. They've seen you at your rawest. They've talked you off a ledge. You've done the same and been there every moment. But the problem is that today, because of the abundance of noise and inbound, we're not being selective about relationships and we're trying to be everything to everyone. We're trying to focus on personal brand and thought leadership and all this stuff that at the end of the day, if you remove the paint, what do you have? And that's the cultural norm today. And it's only going to get worse as the thumbs type faster. And that's a problem.
Do you have another example like Jason? Because that was so interesting. It was such an aha moment for me. It's like, yeah, that's like a no-brainer. It is a hack. And yet done wise and really put some effort into it. It can be very powerful. Do you have another one of them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have a wonderful connector in the book. His name is Steve Sims. He runs a company called The Bluefish. Steve is what I would refer to as a super concierge. When the millionaire and billionaire class want to do something crazy, like, have a private dinner for 6 under the Statue of David, under the Sistine Chapel, listening to Bocelli personally, he's the guy you call. So that just gives you some context of, Mr. like Wizard of Oz, if you will. And again, a simple framework is he really wants to take the treasure trove of context he gets in his conversations and keep it, because it's great to have many conversations, but the human mind can only maintain so much. And so when he has conversations with people, he's noting the environment. He's noting why he is where he is, not just who he's talking to, what that person's doing while they're talking. What are they talking about? What are some unique things that nobody might know about this person, like the favorite drink they're having at the bar by brand and name? What's the thing that, is not on the LinkedIn profile? And he just makes mental notes of all these things. And then later, after the conversation, he literally will just go into his phone, go into the contacts section, go into the notes, and put a bunch of bullets down. Now, why does he do that? It sounds so obvious. Again, I'm sure there's going to be a couple audience members that say, "Oh, that's not something new. That's common sense, Scott." And then I would joke and say, "Yeah, but why aren't you doing it?" Right? But yet, by doing that, 5-6 bullets and doing this methodically over and over again all the time, next time he sees that person or when someone triggers his memory, he can literally go back into his phone and remember everything from who connected them to where they were when they met to the date that was to 3 things that only he knows, whether it's I like to drink Whistle Pig Rye bourbon or I like to dance the Caparina with my wife or my big thing this year is I want to bring my revenues to $1 million and here's the 3 things I'm doing to try to get there. And he uses that context to continue that conversation later. So he's not stopping and starting. Or if he's making introductions from that person to someone else, he uses that context to make that relationship start off from a human level. Hey, look at the key things that this person's doing right now and why they're awesome and amazing and why you should take them seriously. Because this is not, hey, take a look at his LinkedIn page. So it's those little things that people do that I think is the difference maker. I'll give you one more. We have a guy named John Rulin. John owns a company called Giftology. He is an expert gift giver, but yet he has never, ever allowed his clients, nor would he ever give a gift between November and December, which is you're thinking to yourself, how could you have a gifting company and not give anything during the holidays? He said, because I believe in planned randomness, not in in giving into expectations or being expected. The serendipity of what he does is giving something when it isn't expected and making that something so special and specific to that person. But the methodology goes farther than that. So let's take, for example, a set of knives, something very basic. Okay, if he's going to send somebody a set of knives, what do most people do if they send a gift if you're in a business, right? They send a card with the company name on it, right? They engrave it with some swaggy taglines and garbage, right? It's usually very low quality, and they're doing the same gift for 500 people. Sound about right for most people?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what he does is, number one, there is nothing about him or his company anywhere in the gift because a gift is not a promotional item. A gift is a gift. Number two, he doesn't make the gift always. There's always rules to be broken, but he doesn't make the gift for the person that he wants to give that serendipity moment to. He gives it to the person who's most important to that person, whether it's your wife, or your kid, or your assistant. And so now all of a sudden, you're taking care of the people that take care of you. And lastly, he never allows a consumable or a one-time thing. Like, you're not going to give a box of chocolates. Why? Because the chocolates go bad or they get eaten and they go away. So he leaves an artifact, something that will be used over and over again that reminds people of the story of why. So if you send somebody, a CEO client of yours, a hand-engraved, knife set that's the highest caliber and quality and made it out in the family name and sent it with a card to his wife, the CEO's wife. And now every Thanksgiving when that bird is being carved, there is a moment for that story to be told. You can't buy that real estate, even though people try. So this just gives you some idea of how people think about these things.
And it underscores this whole concept that every story, every interaction experience is always powered by the moment. So they've got the gift there. It's that moment of carving. They're always going to remember you when that pops up again. So finally in this, because there is so much that we could be covering in this book, I'm curious on chapter 3 that if you could answer the title for me. So, and for our listeners, what type of connector are you? How many different kinds of connectors are there? And why is it important for us to know our type?
Sure. I mean, look, if you don't know who you are, then how do you expect to know who complements you? Right? I mean, that's the most important thing. How do you find your place in the world to surround yourself with the right people if you don't have enough self-awareness to understand yourself?
And how do you find that?
Well, I think you first of all have to know the kind of person you are, and we've identified, through a study that Erica Jawan did, and she's a wonderful, just an amazing person that has degrees from like every school, MIT, Harvard, all these different places, and she also wrote a book which I highly suggest. I think it's called "Get Big Things Done: The Power of Connectional Intelligence." And according to her, there's 3 types of connectors. There's the thinker, the enabler, and the connection executor. So the thinker is like the visionary. That's the person who's the most curious. They are to the max thinking about, the big play, the big vision, the monster moment that's going to change and light the world on fire, right? And then you have the enabler. And this is the person that can basically assemble people together around the vision and share the idea with them so that they can basically bring the constituency that it's going to take care of. And then finally, there's the connection executor. And these are the people that get it done. These are the folks that are in the trenches and can take other people's ideas and make them happen. So the reason that my partner and I are such good partners is we sort of share the enabler traits, but he is very much the connection executor. I am very much the thinker. And both of those are important in order to move our business, our professional lives forward. So we found that the reason we are so good at what we do is because we've got the 1-2 punch. If we were both thinkers, or if we were both connection executors, then at the end of the day, we wouldn't be able to actually create value because we'd either be too stuck in the weeds trying to, move the ball every day with every little, bullet point being, done and every I being dotted, T being crossed and no vision, or so much vision that we'd be stuck in analysis paralysis of where to get started. So these kinds of things are important from a mindset level. So that's the first thing to know. Then the other two things, I sort of alluded to this earlier, is, there are 3 key traits once you've identified the kind of connector you are that you really have to determine if you have or not. One of those, and I think this goes for many professions and many professional ways of looking at the world, is your emotional.
This is 3 key traits to see if you're a connector, period, because
Correct.
Some people just aren't connectors.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So the first 3 are, if you are a connector, where do you fit? And then these 3 traits are specifically, do I have what it takes to actually have a connection mindset, a connector mentality? Is it in me or am I cheating it? And so the first is, are you emotionally intelligent? Can you actually feel other people's pain, happiness? Do you feel good about helping other people? Are you empathetic? And I think that is just so important, because if you don't like people, you probably shouldn't be a connector. If you don't understand people, if their problems or situations, big or small, annoy you, again, you probably shouldn't be a connector.
Right.
Then the second thing is curiosity. Right? You have to be a curious person. Now, you can learn to be curious. I believe this is a teachable trait. I don't believe you're born curious. But you have to want to learn more, even if it's not a subject matter relevance to you or a person's in an industry you have nothing to do with. Again, connection is not about personal gain. And so the idea that you just want to be a worldly learned person is not a bad thing. And you want to be able to become sort of a Sherlock Holmes of discourse in any conversation that you're in. And so curiosity is crucial. And then finally, the last one is self-awareness, which is where we started earlier. Do you understand how people perceive you, and can you actually perceive what you actually are? Are you honest, emotionally, intelligently, and intellectually with yourself? I've met a lot of people who might have an incredible amount of self-awareness about who they are, but have no self-awareness for how they're perceived, right? Sometimes things like your passion, or especially the type A, people like myself, you could be very self-aware about who you are and what you believe in and what you care about, but yet you don't realize that the way you express yourself, even if it's unintended, could seem arrogant or pompous or out for yourself, even if that's not your intent. And so making sure you understand how you are perceived as much as who you actually are, crucial for a connector, because that's how you're going to build meaningful human relationships.
And by the way, on that last one, the self-awareness, I don't know if you've heard of Sally Hogshead or not, but she has a fascination advantage survey that you can take that tells you how the world sees you. And it's fascinating. It's really worth taking, because when you take it, it's not how you perceive yourself and your strengths and so forth. She asks you a lot about those questions, but the answers you get back is, oh, by the way, this is how the world sees you in action. In fact, I had her here on Business a Story on show 91, and she had a special fascination advantage assessment that our listeners could take. And it may be that they can still take it, but if you haven't done it, Scott, you should try it, because it is really, fascinating.
Look, I sort of leave your audience with this. At the end of the day, there is a simple audit you can do of yourself. It takes 30 seconds, and you're the only one that'll ever know the results, because I find that when you have to share things, you tend to, frankly, if you don't like the results, lie about them or skew them so that people don't feel a different way. So this is the test that I believe you can give to fundamentally change perspective of, are you a connector or not? I want you to honestly dive deep into listening to a conversation. Any conversation that you're going to have personally or professionally in the next week. And as you're talking to whoever, now these have to be people, okay, that you've never met before. So you have to be in a set, either online or in a setting. And in the first 30 seconds of finding out what the person does across the table from you or in the networking room or whatever it is, I want you to catch yourself in one key area. Are you thinking to yourself, oh, I'm so curious, this is my next question, I think I can provide value here? Or are you immediately saying to yourself, this person isn't valuable to me, I need to get out of here? And if you could be emotionally honest with yourself about that, then you can immediately determine if you want to change the way you are or not. Because what I find is if you actually are honest with yourself and you find yourself to be like, oh my God, I actually am somebody who's thinking transactionally. I actually am someone who is only thinking about me, regardless of what comes out of this person's mouth from here on in. Then it's time for a reset if you genuinely want to build these relationships. Otherwise, to the world, you're just going to be, a wolf in sheep's clothing. You're going to be a networker masking as a connector who cares. And so I fundamentally beg of everyone, this simple exercise, don't tell anybody the results. And it doesn't mean you're a horrible person, by the way, if you're just thinking about yourself and your business. But know who you are and trust that. So do that one thing. And then if you really take a second and think like, wow, that is how I'm built. Can I change that? And the next question is, should I change that? And then the next question is, I want to change that. How do I do it?
Yeah. So find that conversation. Be aware that you're having it with a total stranger. And then as that conversation is going on, as they're telling you about themselves, you're asking those two fundamental questions. Am I actually curious about this person and care about learning more? Or is this person not valuable to me, therefore irrelevant to my purpose and cause, and I got to get out of this thing?
Yep. And you'll learn real fast about either how much work you have to do to get aligned with the right, in my view, way of connecting with other people and building community around yourself and building the network that makes your net worth make sense in personal and professional lives, or if you're on the right track. But I think that is the easiest self-audit you can do, and only you need to know the results.
Well, Scott, I am so glad that we connected here on Business' Story. I appreciate so much you taking the time to come and filling us in on this whole idea, this whole new concept of super connector. Maybe it's not even new, but you're really bringing it to the forefront for people to consider. Stop networking, start building those relationships. Where can people find the book, learn more about you and what you're doing at YEC and Community Co?
Absolutely. So obviously for the companies, you can go to community.co, learn about what we do every day for media companies and brands. You can go to yec.co to learn about that particular community. And you can follow myself and my partner on Twitter. We're really active. I'm at Scott Gerber, SCOTTGERBER. He's at Ryan Paugh, at RYANPAUGH. And you can buy the book at superconnector.com or anywhere books are sold on February 27th or later. And thanks so much for the time. Really enjoyed it.
Great having you here. And thank you all for listening to this edition of the Business Story. Now you know how to go out and start connecting in the real world and making meaningful relationships. And what I would encourage you to do, and Scott mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show too, is understand you and your story and who you're for in this world, so that when you are making those meaningful connections out there, you can really have an impact on these folks. And they can help you too, by the way, in this process. But it's all about them first, putting them, foremost in your story, helping them get what they want. And I guarantee you, they will go out of their way to help you get what you want when you put them first. So thanks so much, Scott. This has been awesome. And if I can help you with your business storytelling, join me over at businessstory.com. I've got tools and tips. I've got 130 some episodes now on Business Story of brilliant minds like Scott waiting for you to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And if you like, or even better, air quote, love what we're doing here at Business Story, share this podcast with your friends, your family, your connections, and help them start having a better appreciation for their stories and how they can have an impact in the world by being that super connector too. And until next week, I want you to remember, the most potent story you're ever going to tell are the stories you tell yourself. So make them a great one. Thanks for listening.